Good evening, everyone. B'sha'a tova u'mutzlachat. We are starting, Baruch Hashem, got to the third book of the Torah, Sefer Vayikra. After a few months, if we remember, starting from Simchat Torah, right after Simchat Torah, we started the new cycle of the Torah, starting from Bereshit, from the new cycle, went through all the stories of our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, our four mothers, the whole story with the flood and Noach and all the generations, all the way until Yaakov Avinu and the 12 tribes. Sefer Shmot, we went through Am Yisrael, the 12 tribes, the sons of Yaakov Avinu, which went down to Egypt. And from there, we got our big and large exile of Egypt. There we became slaves. There we had a hard time, but from there we also saw Hashem. From there, Am Yisrael, and we're going to see maybe at the end of the shiur, we'll speak a few minutes about it. Am Yisrael got to know Hashem. And not just Am Yisrael, but the whole world got to know Hashem because Am Yisrael was in Egypt. Because Hashem needed to take Am Yisrael out of Egypt, then they got the privilege to see Hashem, to know that He exists. And we'll speak about it for a few minutes at the end of the shiur. Going through the Exodus from Egypt into Har Sinai, receiving the Torah in Parashat Yitro, going on to the desert and the commandment that we read just a few weeks ago, Ve'asu li mikdash ve'shachanti betocham. You shall build a temple for me, a house for Hashem, which is the temple, or in the desert, it's the tabernacle, and I will be present. Hashem says, I will be present in that place. And we read in the past few weeks how to build it, the measurements, what each thing in the temple needs to be built out of gold, pottery, silver, how much money needs to be brought, all the donations, all of these different wonderful things that we hope and pray that any day we shall come and be able to fulfill this commandment of building a house for Hashem, building the Bet HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, Bezrat Hashem, already Bezrat Hashem for what we're going to celebrate in just 1 week, Pesach. We are still praying that this coming Pesach, we're not going to be in Durban, we're not going to be all over the world. All the Jewish people will get to Yerushalayim. As it says in the Mishnah, one of the miracles that they said in Yerushalayim, that happened in Yerushalayim, Me'olam lo amar li Adam, tsar li hamakom. No one ever said in Yerushalayim, there was no place. No one ever said it was too stuffy, it was too pushy. No, one of the miracles, they would stand one next to each other. When they would bow down, each one would have their separate area. That was one of the miracles that are brought down in the Mishnah, and we hope and pray that all the Jewish people, Bezrat Hashem, will go to Eretz Israel, will move to Eretz Israel, will make Aliyah to Eretz Israel, and Bezrat Hashem, with our movements, with our actions, Hashem will also see and come beyond us and give us Bet HaMikdash and peace as we're praying every single day, several times a day. And after all that, we get to Parashat Vayikra, to Sefer Vayikra, a new book. Another name for Sefer Vayikra is Torat Kohanim. Here we have a Kohen in the shiur, Norman Gantz. So I hope you're listening very well, and all other Kohanim that will be listening, and also Am Yisrael, because it's not just for the Kohanim, it's part of all of Am Yisrael. But the reason that one of the names for this book is Torat Kohanim, because it deals with a lot of the work of the Kohanim in Bet HaMikdash. We all know that in Bet HaMikdash we have different levels of purity. We have the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodashim, which only once a year, only one person can go into that place, the Kohen HaGadol, on Yom Kippur, and only then. Beforehand, we have the Kodesh, where we have the Menorah, the Lechem HaPanim, the Mizbeach HaKtoret, which we spoke about previously, and outside we have the Chatzer, where a lot more people were allowed in, not just the Kohanim that were working in that week, but also a lot of people and some opinions in the Talmud. Also, Am Yisrael would go in there on Pesach. And outside we have Har HaBayit, the Mount Temple, and outside we have Yerushalayim, and then outside of Yerushalayim is all the same. So here we see a few levels of purity, starting from the outside of Yerushalayim, into Yerushalayim, in Har HaBayit, in the Chatzer, in the Kodesh, until we get to Kodesh HaKodashim. And some places were allowed for only and only the Kohanim to walk into, and some were allowed for the Levi'im to go into, and some were allowed for Am Yisrael to go into. In this book, as we're going to see, it starts with the sacrifices, it starts with the offerings that Am Yisrael would bring to Bet HaMikdash, that the Kohanim would bring to Bet HaMikdash for different and several reasons. We're not going to go into the details of each one of the offerings because that's very easy. This parasha is very understandable by reading it, by seeing different details of how to sacrifice, what needs to be brought, but we're going to deal tonight a little more of the different kinds of offerings that were brought and why were they brought for those reasons. And Bezrat Hashem, after that, we're going to try to understand the whole meaning of a sacrifice, the whole meaning of the offerings to Bet HaMikdash. Why do we need it? What is it so important for? And we're going to see that it is important because there are several things that were written down of these korbanot. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to get to that after we see the kinds of the korbanot which are brought down in our parasha, Parashat Vayikra. The parasha starts with the pasuk. Vayikra el Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed le'emor. Hashem calls upon to Moshe and starts speaking to him from Ohel Moed. Ohel Moed was the area of the Chatzer in the tabernacle in the desert, and he says to Moshe, Daber el bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem Adam ki akriv mikem korban laHashem min ha'behema min ha'bakar u'min ha'tzon takrivu et korbanechem. He tells to Moshe to tell to Am Yisrael, Adam, a person which will want to sacrifice from himself, a sacrifice, an offering to Hashem, you need to bring it from the cattle, from the lambs. That's what the offering should be brought from. And in our parasha, we have 4 main kinds of offerings that were brought down in different times and by different people, by different situations, where each person, individual, got pulled into that situation, and because of that, he needed to bring that specific offering. We have in our parasha, starts with Korban Olah, and then Korban Mincha, Korban Shlamim, and Korban Chatat. And we'll go into, just for a few minutes, to each one to see what is it about, when was it brought, why was it brought, and maybe an example. Starting with Korban Olah, the word Olah means to rise, to level up. And we will see in just a minute that there's a specific reason for this name as the Torah brings it, Olah la Hashem. There are Korbanot Olah that were brought by individuals. There were Korbanot Olah that were brought by the public. And the word Olah means Olah la Hashem, means that this whole offering was brought only to Hashem. Now, what does that mean? Every offering was brought to Hashem. But this one, we'll see in just a few minutes in other types of korbanot, that the offerings were eaten by different people. Sometimes only the Kohanim, sometimes by the Kohanim and the person that brought this specific offering, but Korban Olah was not eaten by anyone. Korban Olah, just like its name is, leveling up or ascending up only to Hashem. The whole Korban would be sacrificed on the altar, was not eaten not by the Kohanim and not by the people that would donate this Korban. And why do we have Korban Olah? Korban Olah comes in specific times. Korban Olah we have in the morning, and Korban Olah we have in the afternoon, and that is a public sacrifice, which is brought from the money of all of Am Yisrael. And this is brought for different sins that a person or that Am Yisrael have done in different times as a public. Because we're going to see that if a person did a specific sin, he needs to bring a specific korban, which we're going to see the fourth korban of our parasha. But the meaning of olah needs to come from the meaning of the heart. We have a different pasuk which says, המדבר על, which says, והעולה על רוחכם היו לא תהיה. The korban olah doesn't come just for a physical action that a person did by mistake or on purpose, something that is not allowed by the Torah. As it says in the pasuk, ha'oleh al ruchachem, that something that a person even thought to do something wrong, that is when you bring the olah. Ha'oleh, from the word olah, just if someone thought of doing something wrong, then he should bring an olah. And olah is not something that a person has to bring, it would become as a donation. That if a person feels that he wants to sacrifice to Hashem, he wants to give an offering to Hashem, he's allowed to bring it with a korban olah. And this is one of the reasons that if a person just thought of something to do which is not allowed to do, the solution for taking this, for making the solution for his sin of just thinking is the korban olah. And we're going to see at the end, after we finish with the types of the korbanot, about the meaning of the korbanot, and we'll see why it's so important. The next korban is, we have a korban mincha. Korban mincha would come from things from the tzomeach, from the ground, which would be brought to Bet HaMikdash. Most of the korbanot mincha would be given and donated by solet chitim, and very few also by barley, and it would come as a donation, as a matana. Just like the mincha, the word mincha comes out of the word matana, a present. And that is a person that just wants to say thank you to Hashem, a person that wants to say thank you to Hashem for anything that happened in his life. It could be on a daily basis, it could be from a one time to one time. That is why we have korban mincha, from something from the ground, which also assemblies something to say thank you Hashem for the food that we have, because all the food comes from the ground, from the wheat, the bread, and that's why this korban is coming from the tzomeach, coming from things that grow in the ground, to say thank you to Hashem for everything that we have. And just an example, that we're coming up to Pesach. In just 1 week, we have Bdikat Chametz this year, and on the second night, Motzei Yom Tov Rishon, at the end of the first day Yantif, which is the beginning of the second day Yantif in outside of Israel, we start with the great mitzvah, which we're going to speak about, Bezras Hashem, Sfirat HaOmer, counting the Omer, the 49 days from the Exodus to Matan Torah, receiving the Torah on Sinai Mountain. And what is brought at the beginning, on Zayin Nisan, just a day after the first day of Pesach, we bring Minchat HaOmer. Minchat HaOmer is one of the mitzvot which needs to be brought on the 16th day of Nisan, and that was brought from barley. And we won't go into the reason why it's brought from barley and why specific a day after the Exodus, which is barley is more food for animals and not for human beings. But Bezrat Hashem, when we learn about Sfirat HaOmer, we're going to bring the reasons of why we start from barley, and when we get to Shavuot, when we get to Matan Torah, when we receive the Torah, then we give Minchat Chitim, the Korban Mincha, which is made out of the wheat, and we go up from the level of barley all the way to the level of wheat in these 49 days of renewing ourselves, showing ourselves that we can go up the 49 levels which we were damaged into them in Egypt. The next korban which we have is korban shlamim. This is also one of the types of korbanot which were given in Bet HaMikdash, and it would come also, usually, it would come as a donation. And the korban would be split up into 3. Some of the parts of the korban would be burnt on the altar. Some of the parts would be eaten by the Kohanim, specific parts, and some of the parts would be eaten by the person that's donating, giving this Korban Shlamim to Bet HaMikdash. And that's why it's called Shlamim from the word full, from the word Shalem, to show that everybody is being part of this. Also, the Kohen, also giving it to Hashem, and also the person that is donating. Everybody is enjoying from this korban. And not just everybody's enjoying, this specific korban does not have to be eaten only in Bet HaMikdash like other korbanot, but it can also be eaten out anywhere inside the boundaries of Yerushalayim. We're not allowed to take it out of Yerushalayim. It needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim. A great example for Korban Shlamim is Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach is, as we're coming up to Pesach, and we should all fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach and Bet HaMikdash this year, that is one of a type of Korban Shlamim, which is brought to Bet HaMikdash, and it is eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim. It doesn't have to be eaten in Bet HaMikdash because we eat it only at night after we tell the story of the Exodus and everything, but it can be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim. So one of a great example for our time that we're coming up to Pesach is that Korban Pesach is a type of Korban Shlamim, and also Shalmei Chagiga, another sacrifice that we bring on the holidays, on Sukkot, Shavuot, and Pesach, together with the other Korbanot. Shalmei Chagiga, also that we enjoy from it, the Kohanim, Hashem, and ourselves. And the fourth and last type of Korban that we have in our parasha is Korban Chatat. Korban Chatat comes out of the word Chet, out of the word that a person did a sin. And when is it brought? On what kinds of sin does the Korban Chatat be brought to Bet HaMikdash? If a person did a sin from the Torah, which is not allowed to do, and he did it by accident. By accident means we could split into two different kinds of accidents. One of them, he could say, I didn't know it's not allowed. A person can say, I didn't know it's not allowed, and he did it by accident, and he needs to bring a Korban Chatat. Or the other way is to say, I know it's not allowed, but I didn't know that specifically today is the day that we're not allowed to do it. And a great example for that is Shabbat. Shabbat, a person can say, I did something on Shabbat, and after Shabbat, I learned that it's not allowed to do. I didn't know that it's not allowed to do on Shabbat. For that case, he needs to bring a Korban Chatat because he did a sin by accident of something that was not allowed to be done from the Torah. Another case of Shabbat, which he knows this specific thing that is not allowed to do on Shabbat, but he was in some kind of bedroom or closed house for a very long time, and he didn't know. He lost count of the days. He didn't know that today was Shabbat. So he knows that this action is not allowed to be done on Shabbat, but he didn't know that today specifically is Shabbat. And that's also another kind of accident, which a person would need to bring Korban Chatat if he did some kind of sin and went over something that is written in the Torah, which is not allowed to be done. And this Korban Chatat is named Holy of Holies, Kodesh Kodashim, which is brought. The blood is being thrown on the corners of the Mizbeach, which is that is part of the offering and part of the process of giving this sacrifice in Bet HaMikdash. And even there are some chataot, which are brought on Yom Kippur or some other days, which the blood is even thrown in Kodesh HaKodashim, or other places inside the Kodesh, in other different places which are more pure and pure. And we see that Korban Chatat is one of the important chataot, and which we're going to get to the meaning for it right now. So those are the four types of korbanot which we have in our parasha. And now I want to deal for a few minutes just on the meaning of the korbanot. Why do we have the korbanot at all? And what is it coming to teach us, to tell us? And how do we need to act Be'ezrat Hashem when we will have Bet HaMikdash? The holy books with the rabbis are telling us that the level of the korbanot, the meaning of the korbanot, is in such a high level spiritually that we don't understand everything. or maybe we understand very, very little of it. And also in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, which Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote, which he wrote about everything in the world in a very special way, which only very specific people can understand, the korbanot aren't mentioned there too much. And why is that? Because only when Bet HaMikdash will be built, only when we have Bet HaMikdash, only then we're going to understand 100% why do we have the korbanot. But now we're going to try very little, just to touch very only one type, one sand drip of the meaning of the korbanot. The Mishnah in Masechet Avot tells us al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed. There are three things that the world stands upon: al haTorah, al ha'avodah, ve'al gemilut chasadim. On the Torah, on the working, and on caring for other people. Torah. We have also other psukim which tell us that if we would have 1 second without learning Torah in the whole entire world, we would go back to the time of Tohu Vavohu, before the world was created, and have nothing here. So Baruch Hashem, when it's night over here, it's day in America, and it's when night over there, it's morning over here, and going all over the world, there's always day and night in every place, and it allows us to always have the Torah to continue being taught and learned. Avodah, the working, that is referring to Avodat Bet HaMikdash. And Gemilut Chasadim, caring for other people. Those are the three things. For those three things, the world is standing up. Let's deal with the second one, the middle one, the Avodah, the work in the temple. Today that we don't have the temple, we say, Ezu Avodah Shebalev Hevei Omer Zot Tfilah. Which is the working in our heart, worshiping from our heart? That is the davening. But at the time of Bet HaMikdash, there are lots of questions. Did they have davening? What kind of davening? When Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt, will we continue daven? Because some of the sacrifice would be coming for the davening, or the opposite. The davening came in order to remember the sacrifices. As we said beforehand, the sacrifice that would be brought in the morning, we have the morning service. The sacrifice that would be brought in the afternoon, we have mincha. We have the service in the afternoon. On Shabbat, we would have a special sacrifice. We have Musaf, Yom Kippur, Yantif. All of these different days, we'd have sacrifices, special sacrifices in Bet HaMikdash. And that's why we add more davenings on these specific days. But what is the meaning of all these offerings? What is the meaning? The Torah tells us something very, very special about the korbanot. It says that when the korbanot were sacrificed on the altar, the smoke would go up. And going back to the miracles of Yerushalayim, one of the miracles that is brought down, that the smoke from the altar that would be going up towards Hashem, even if there was winds, the wind would not break the smoke. What does that mean? That the smoke would always go up straight. The wind wouldn't start blowing the smoke all over. The smoke of from the altar would go up straight directly to Hashem. And this comes from the pasuk, Ishe reach nichoach laHashem. The smell of the offerings, the smell of the sacrifices from the altar is reach nichoach, is something special for Hashem, something that Hashem is pleasured from, something that Hashem enjoys from the sacrifices that we bring. Nachat ruach lefanai, I am having nachat from what I told them to bring the offerings, and they are doing it. From the smoke that is coming up, I am having nachat from that. And how is that connected to us? How is that connected to the individual or public people which give the offerings in Bet HaMikdash? If we take an example of the donations or the offering of the chatat, which we said if someone does a sin, a person would need to think, and this is also brought down in the Mesilat Yesharim in the 4th chapter, that if Hashem wouldn't have mercy upon us, if we would have done a sin in the Torah, right away, directly, we should get our punishment. It depends what we did. Sometimes it's malkot, sometimes it's karet, sometimes it's a different mitat beitin. If Hashem wouldn't have mercy upon us, we would have a horrible world. We would have a person would do a sin, and right away he would get the punishment. And let's think, if Hashem didn't have mercy upon us, what would happen? Let's give an example. If a person has a bonfire and he puts his hand in the fire, what would happen to his hand? It would burn right away. The fire won't say, "Oh, no, let's leave it. Let's let him have his hand there, and let's give him a second chance." The fire isn't saying that. And then the person will learn that he will not touch the fire again. But Hashem is not like that. Hashem has mercy on every and single one of us, of the Jewish people, showing us that even though we go over the Torah that he gave us, even though he's giving us so much in this world, all the food, all the money, everything, every second that we live, that our heart beats, we need to say, thank you, Hashem, for kol neshima v'neshima. As it says, kol neshama tehalleluya, alleluia. Kol neshama, which is the soul, but also we could switch the word as kol neshima v'neshima. We need to thank Hashem on every breath and breath that we breathe in our life. We need to thank Hashem because that's such a wonderful thing. And Hashem could have given us a punishment right away if we did something wrong, but Hashem says, no. I have mercy on you. Hashem created the world with together with mercy and also judgment, but also together with mercy. Shitef et midat harachamim lemidat hadin. And that's why we also, for another reason, we have the sacrifices. As we said, if a person did a sin, he needs to get punished. But he also has another way. He could come and give this animal as a sacrifice to Bet HaMikdash, bring it as an offering on the altar, and to say, I was supposed to be on that altar right now. I was supposed to be burnt right now because of the different sin that I did. But what does the Torah tell us in another place? V'chai b'hem. You need to live the Torah. You're not supposed to die over the Torah. You need to live the Torah. And we say that even on Yom Kippur to teach us that if someone cannot fast because different specific things, he doesn't need to fast. Because if it's dangerous, then we're not allowed to do it. But the Torah is coming to tell us to die on the altar. The Torah is coming to give us another chance, to give an offering and bring it upon the altar, and to think and to do with an action, and to say that this animal that is going upon the altar, it's really supposed to be me. But Hashem has mercy upon us and is giving us another chance, is giving us another way to respect us, to say we're sorry, and to say we learned and we're trying to learn our lesson and not to do it again. And this is one of the reasons that some korbanot, we have 3 levels of actions. First, they bring the korban to the person which is giving the korban, and he does smicha on it. He takes his 2 hands and he puts his 2 hands on the head of the korban, and he says that I'm giving this korban because of the sin and a specific sin that I did, or whatever reason he's giving this korban. And he's doing an action here. He's putting his hands on the head. He's saying that he's sorry, and he's doing vidui, like we do on Yom Kippur, saying that he's sorry in front of Hashem. And maybe the most important part of it is the thinking. It needs to come from the thought of the person. I am supposed to be on the altar, but I'm not, because Hashem is giving us another chance. And in all the other mitzvot, we need to have in common, we need to have in our thoughts that we're going to do a mitzvah in front of Hashem. But also, if someone didn't think of the correct mitzvah, or that he's going to do a mitzvah, but he did it on the way, he gets the reward. And even even Chazal, the Chachamim tell us, lo lishma ba lishma. If a person can't do it because he wants to do it in front of Hashem, then do it also for other things. If a person wants to learn Torah, but it's hard for him to learn Torah because he needs to make a living, then earn some money over it. Earn a salary by learning Torah. And by earning the salary, and because you're earning the salary, you're learning Torah, you're also going to get to the level of learning Torah without caring about the money. As it says, Tov li Torat picha me'alfei zahav v'chesef. The Torah is much more pleasured than all the millions of gold and silver that I could receive. But sometimes it's hard to get to that kind of level. So the Chachamim tell us, fine, start at a level that you get a reward from it. But from there, you'll get up to the next level of doing it even without no reward, doing it just because we love Hashem, and that's what Hashem told us. Same idea, but when we get to the korbanot, if a person did not think the correct thought that he's supposed to think, that he is giving the sacrifice because he did a sin, because he did X and Y, the sacrifice will not be counted. And not just that it won't be counted, the Zohar HaKadosh that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote, that if the sacrifice was brought without the correct thought, a shape of a dog would become on the altar to show that the person is not thinking the correct thought. He's bringing because he wants to think that other people will see him bring. He's bringing because so he can just do a check on his calendar that he brought the sacrifice. But Hashem, koret kol ha'machshavet, he reads all the thoughts. And in this specific topic, and the topic of the korbanot, the thought has a matter 100%. As we said in all the other mitzvot, if a person cannot think the correct thought of why he's doing a mitzvah, do the mitzvah. We're getting to Pesach. A person doesn't know 100% why to eat matzot. He doesn't know why we're telling the story. Tell the story. After that, you can learn. But by eating the matzah, by drinking the 4 cups of wine, by telling the story of the Exodus, you fulfill a mitzvah, even though you're not 100% why you're doing it. But the korbanot, when we get to the sacrifices, that's different. That's because we said that it's supposed to be the person itself being on the altar. But because Hashem had mercy upon us, then we're giving the sacrifice. Then Hashem is giving, and that's why the thought is so important in this case. That's what the Torah tells us. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, as we say every single morning and every single night in Shema Yisrael. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha. You should love Hashem with all your heart and u'v'chol nafshecha. What does u'v'chol nafshecha mean? Afilu notelet nafshecha. Even if you got to a situation where you need to jump into the fire, where you need to sacrifice yourself, also in those cases, love Hashem. And that's why there are several and lots of stories where soldiers, or we go back to the Holocaust, or to Aseret Harugei Malchut, which they sacrificed themselves. What was the last pasuk in the words, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad? But on the other hand, we have V'chai Bahim. So Hashem isn't telling us to go and sacrifice ourselves. He's giving us another chance by doing it with something else, with an animal or a korban mincha from the ground. Depends on which korban, as we spoke about beforehand, and why he needs to bring it for which sin. And that is just in general, just a few words and a few meanings of the importance of the korbanot, why we have the korbanot. As we go into Sefer Vayikra, we'll have a few parshas dealing with the korbanot, dealing with the different sacrifices and the offering in Bet HaMikdash. And as we said, Bezrat Hashem, we should see Bet HaMikdash in our days being rebuilt. And by making that happen, we daven 3 times a day, but not just enough. We also, as we said, also our thoughts need to be there. Our thoughts, we want Bet HaMikdash, we want to get to Yerushalayim, and if we do what we want, there's something that says, "En davar ha'omed bifnei haratzon," there's nothing that can stand in front of someone's will. If someone wants to do something, he can make it happen. And if we will really want to get to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, that can happen. Yes, maybe it's not easy. There are a lot of difficulties. But if a person wants, he can make it happen. And see that we got to it's getting late a little. We can say just maybe one word about Pesach, which is coming up in just a week and a few days. And as we know, it's a mitzvah to tell the story of the Exodus on Leil HaSeder. V'yigadeta levinecha bayom hahu lemor, ba'avur ze asa Hashem li b'tzetim mimitzrayim. It's a mitzvah to tell the story of the Exodus to our children. And if a person doesn't have a child next to him, to his spouse, and also if he's by himself, he needs to ask himself what is different in this night. This night Hashem took us out of Egypt. And we have the Haggadah, we have the 4 cups of wine, the mitzvah of eating the matzah. But the question comes and arises, all year long we're mentioning Yetziat Mitzrayim. In we mention Yetziat Mitzrayim. In Kiddush, all year long, every single Friday night, Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. Every Yantef, Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. In davening, Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. Always remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim. But on this night, we're not just remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim. On this night, we are acting just like we are leaving Egypt. Right? It says, Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo keilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. A person needs to see himself. And the Rambam brings down, Chayav Adam leharot et atzmo. He needs to show off himself that he himself left Egypt. And coming to this night, the meaning of this night is very, very important. And Zat Hashem, if we have time, then we will give another shiur about Leil HaSeder, about Pesach. If not, then we'll give it in shul. But coming to this night, we need to prepare ourselves. It's not enough just to come 5 minutes before and say, okay, let's do Leil HaSeder. A person needs to prepare. Additional to all the laws of kashering our kitchen and cleaning the house and getting all the chametz out of ourselves and out of the house and dealing with all the preparations of Pesach, a person also needs to look at the spiritual side, to learn the Haggadah beforehand, to come with the laws of the Haggadah ready, and to have this night of Leil HaSeder, a night of enjoyment, a night for the kids to ask questions, a night of feeling that we are leaving Mitzrayim. And we can say, but what, we left Mitzrayim over 3,000 years ago? Each one and one of us has our own Mitzrayim. We are slaves for something. It doesn't need to be idols, chas v'chalila, because idols is not allowed to do by the Torah, but it could be even something small. And when you think, what is our mindset always stuck up to? Is it work? Are we always thinking about work? Are we always thinking about money? Always thinking how to earn some more money? That is kind of a Mitzrayim that we need to try to push out of our heads and maybe put in more Torah into our heads, as we said beforehand. And one of the 3 things that the world is standing upon is the Torah. Just an example of how we need to feel on this night, just not just to remember, like all the other days, as it says, Leman tizkor et yom tzatcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha. And you remember the Exodus every single day, all year long. But on this night, it's not just remembering, it's also feeling and doing that we are leaving Egypt. We are leaving the slavery that we're into, each one and one, its individual slavery. There's just a few very short words about Pesach. Pesach, there's a lot to speak about, and Bezrat Hashem will find time. And I wish you all a great weekend and a Shabbat Shalom.